Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Pulse of the Pack. Here is one of our new team members here. We have Team Degenerate in the house, so let's get rich, kids. I have Matt Bove with me. Matt, how's New Jersey going?
Uh, well, it was 90 degrees yesterday, so that threw me off a little bit, but fall is here, and that means it's football betting time.
Yeah, it's football betting time. There's plenty of time to make money. So tell us a little bit. I've been often telling the story about how you funded an entire trip to Green Bay based on your gambling winnings alone. But is that the best story that you have in terms of betting on games?
Uh, yeah, I guess you could say that. I mean, last year was a good year for me. Obviously, being in New Jersey now with with they legalized gambling last year for sports, it's been one of the uh, one of the rare good things about living in New Jersey is to have that opportunity. So I enjoyed it last year. It's a good way to enjoy games, especially if you have a Monday night football matchup like Steelers Bengals where you wouldn't really watch otherwise, and you make a bet on it. You'll have a lot more invested interest in it. But it's something that I do during the week, and I listen to a lot of people, do a lot of my own research, and it's fun.
Yeah,
What
that
do
makes it
you?
a lot more fun instead of just going off basic knowledge. So that's kind of the reasoning behind wanting to do this kind of segment is because a lot of people just blindly throw darts at the wall and hope that they say, "Oh, I like that spread. I think Green Bay could cover, 3 points against Dallas, for example. They're 3 point underdogs this week in Dallas." So let's start there. This is obviously a Packers centric show, so it's not often, although it has worked out this year specifically, that you have bet the Packers game every single week. So correct me if I'm wrong, but have you bet Green Bay to cover every game up to this point?
Yeah, well, the Denver game, I bet them on a teaser with the Vikings, so I teased them down to -2, and the Vikings were about to say the -2. So that week was a teaser, which won. And then, yes, the Bears was a week 1 win. I did bet them against the the teaser with the Vikings. Yes, the Vikings game, I bet them because I thought that was a good revenge spot for the Packers, being that they had lost so many games to the Vikings in recent years, and I was on them pretty heavily last week against the Eagles, and they disappointed me in a big way.
That they did, and I thought for sure that with some of the stuff you were telling me that Green Bay was definitely a big time lock to cover that spread that they had against the Eagles. But alas, that did not work. So this week again, you happen to be betting the Packers game, but you're betting on the Dallas Cowboys. So let's start first and foremost with kind of the big swing injury that I assume was one of the big reasons for you wanting to bet this game, and that was that Michael Gallup is going to play on Sunday, and it looks like Kevin King is not. So I imagine that played into your thoughts and process on there. So tell me a little bit about what that matchup specifically does with your thinking on Packers and Cowboys.
Yeah, if you watch the New Orleans game with Dallas, what they were able to do was, they had their lockdown cornerback Marshawn Lattimore, take Amari Cooper out of the game, and the running game wasn't there, and Dak really had no other options to go to the ball. Gallup, maybe not that many people might not be familiar with him, but in the first few weeks he was going off. I feel as though he's one of the best number 2 wide receivers in the league at this point. And Kevin King, without him, and without Tony Brown, who you didn't mention, but if it doesn't look like he hasn't practiced all week, so I don't think he'll be in there. So the Packers would probably have to move Josh Jackson out from the number 3 safety spot. They'll either put Jackson on the inside and Jamal Williams on the outside, or vice versa. Either way, that's really creating 2 holes with Raven Green here. I don't know what the Packers will do with that third safety spot. Maybe they'll use an inside linebacker, second one more with trying to have to stop Ezekiel Elliott. But I don't think a Gallup on Josh Jackson or Jamal Williams is a winning matchup for the Packers.
No, and I imagine that's the biggest one. Some good injury news today was that Brian Bulaga looks like he's going to play. He's practiced the last 2 days. Had he not practiced, then that would have been the big concern on the offensive side of the ball. In addition to obviously the news that Devontae Adams has not practiced the last 2 days. So I know that's been a big sticking point for you for most of this offseason, really starting in February when the season ended, discussing a lack of attention to the wide receiver position. So, with Devontae Adams out, I imagine, again, part of your process is thinking, one, you don't really believe in Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Geronimo Allison and Jimmy Graham and some of those guys to pick up the slack. And in addition, the Packers, as in turn, are not going to be able to put up as many points on the Cowboys. Tell me a little bit about your thinking in that regard, too.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a point where a lot of the people, the market is missing this essentially. I mean, I don't understand how this is a 3.5 point spread, 3 point spread, which has gone back and forth. And not only is it that 3.5 point spread, the money's coming in on the Packers from both the public and the professionals. 60% of the tickets, according to pregame, have been on the Packers. 72% of the cash. So I mean, I just I don't see it with Adams. I mean, this was my big fear. If he gets hurt, it's bad enough that when he's healthy that you just have one really go-to guy without much surrounding him. But when he's hurt, I mean, you have a bunch of undrafted rookie free agents and Marquez Valdez-Scantling as a fifth-round pick, and a bunch of tight ends who are probably the slowest group in the league. And Dallas's defense has been very good this year, so I just don't. It's going to be very difficult to score on the road, with this group that they're going to be running out there.
Yeah, I think that's the big matchup that a lot of people are going to have their eyes on. And if Green Bay is to lose, that could be the big reason why going into Sunday's game. So
it's an underrated factor. People don't realize unless you follow the Packers closely just how important Adams is. I think on the point spread, not many quarterback or non-quarterback injuries are going to move the point spread unless it's a cluster group where you have a bunch of guys injured at one specific position. But Adams is definitely worth at least 1 point on the point spread, maybe even a little more.
Yeah, and I think that the assumption, at least from the public, is just one thing that can get you into trouble with gambling is going on things that have worked in the past. Aaron Rodgers has typically played very well in Dallas. Something I've talked about with some colleagues this week is that it's not really going to matter that he played well in Dallas in 2017 when he had Jordy Nelson, Devontae Adams, and Randall Cobb, in addition to a young rookie, Aaron Jones, who was playing really well and a relative unknown. And at the time, the tight end who was on the team at the time, who I have promised not to name ever again, but he was on the team and he was a threat more so than Jimmy Graham is right now. So that's something that I think a lot of people are just assuming. One, Rodgers has always played well. The Packers have typically played well in Dallas. And two,
I think it's going to be, haven't seen this brought up anywhere, but I think this is a revenge game for Dallas. I mean, a lot of those same players have been on the teams that Rodgers has torched, in the playoffs, 2 years ago in Dallas. But much like the Packers had a pretty lengthy losing streak against the Vikings heading in the Week 2 game, I think Dallas is. If you were a Dallas fan, I would, I'd hate the Packers. So, I think, that's kind of an underrated factor. This is a pretty big revenge game, and Dallas is coming off a loss to boot, so I think they're going to be highly motivated. I just don't see, the spread's basically saying these are pretty much even teams. I don't, especially with the injuries right now, I can't see it. Even when they're healthy, I think Dallas, if you just look at the rosters up and down each position, besides for quarterback, and Dak is playing very well this year, one of the best in the league so far, and maybe the secondary, Dallas is better everywhere on the roster.
Yeah, that's probably true too. The other thing I was getting at was that people think that Aaron Rodgers is just going to make chicken salad out of chicken you-know-what when it comes to receivers, because people have done that in the past. Big opportunity here for Matt LaFleur to showcase his game planning abilities with a team that really is shorthanded and honestly outgunned. I'm with you. If I were betting this week, I would bet on the Cowboys as well. Let's move forward, because every week we will talk about the Packers and how you feel about that game specifically this week. If you don't have a strong viewing point on the Packers game, then we'll talk about some props or something like that you like.
I have one more point. The over-under is 47. They've dropped down to 46.5. Normally I don't play a lot of over-unders, but this one I definitely see an under game.
Yeah, I think I agree with you.
These teams are not fast-paced teams, and they'll turn the ball over a lot. Both teams, Rodgers and Dak, both protect the ball, and actually, You think, well, if you're betting an under, you want worse quarterbacks you're going to turn over the ball. That actually, when you turnovers create more points because it leads to short fields.
Correct.
So I think the Packers will die more of a slow death in this one on the ground. Obviously, their rush defense has been atrocious, and you're facing Zeke. And Dallas, without Tyron Smith, in the 4 games they play with him with Prescott, without Tyron Smith, who likely will be out, they've scored 7, 9, 12, and 6 points in those games.
Yeah, this feels a lot like 17-13, 17-10 kind of game between Green Bay and Dallas. We'll see if that young secondary is able to hold up for Green Bay, because really I think if Dallas is going to score their points in bunches, it's going to have to come in the passing game. But we'll talk more about that. We'll talk about the Packers every week, like I mentioned. But this week you're on Dallas, and you'll Dallas -3, I think is what we said. You got them -3.
I got them at 3. They were at, like I said, the money's coming in the Packers, so they got moved down to 3 for a little bit. So I was able to get it, when it was at 3. Which if we do a broader segment on processes, I'll go into more about how it's so important to get that best number. But it's probably at 3.5. Went back to 3.5 after it went down to 3.
Okay, so it bounced back and forth. Let's go to the other games that we have this week. So first and foremost, you're not somebody who's going to bet like 25 games in a given week. You kind of pick some of the best matchups and go from there. And I think it's important as a gambler to have some discipline in which games you're betting, because I do know the worst gamblers are the ones that bet just to bet. So what we have this week is we have 3 games, and we'll go through everything. We have the Ravens and the Steelers. We have the Browns and the 49ers, and we have the Bears and the Raiders in London. So let's start with the Bears. They're a 5-point favorite against Oakland, and you like the Bears this week. They have a lengthy injury report, but this sounds like, you mentioned a revenge game factor. This sounds like leaning towards Khalil Mack trying to eat John Gruden throughout the course of the game. What's your thinking on the Bears covering a 5-point spread?
Definitely one of the factors that was on the top of my head. I hate to come on here the first show betting against the Packers and betting on the Bears, but we gotta go where we think the money will lead us. Oakland, I don't know who made their schedule, but if I was a Raiders, fan or worked for the Raiders, I'd be absolutely pissed by this. Their schedule leading up to this, they've had 2 road games at Minnesota, at Indianapolis. Then they didn't even go back to Oakland. They just went right to London, in the beginning of the week. And then they come back after the bye and have 2 more road games at the Packers and at the Texans. So that's absolutely asinine, but for them it's a huge disadvantage. I think arriving at London, on a Monday is, you're spending a week away on foreign soil. There's tons of distractions, and I could see, a Gruden team coming off a huge win over Indianapolis and having a fun week out there, and being complacent. So I think that's going to work against them. Like you said, Khalil Mack is absolutely going to want to tear Carr apart, and he probably will. And I think the Bears, with Chase Daniel taking over, I think they get a boost. I mean, I don't think the players were happy with Trubisky. I don't feel like Nagy really felt he had the whole playbook at his disposal. And with the veteran in there, I think he feels like he's going to be able to call more of his plays. And with the way he looked against Minnesota, you're not going to see much of a downgrade at all. And I just don't see a neutral field 5 points. I think the Bears are, based on my power ratings, they should be closer to 7.
Yeah, that's something interesting, and we'll have to go through your power rankings on a future event here as well. But yeah, I think that most people would look and say, "Oh, backup quarterback," but really, Mitchell Trubisky hadn't been playing that well, and now Chase Daniel doesn't represent that big of a downgrade. And when people talk about backup quarterbacks around the league, I think that's the biggest reason that backups can have success. For example, the offense in Minnesota in 2017, they originally built that for Sam Bradford, and then when Case Keenum came in, it wasn't that big of a deal because the difference between Case Keenum and Sam Bradford is next to nothing, if anything. So I'm interested to see that. Ultimately, I feel bad for Derek Carr. I made the joke over the week that they're going to have to pull Nathan Peterman off of injured reserve because Mack will have eaten all of the quarterbacks by the end of the game. I too like Chicago here. I think your line and your reasoning here is very solid. So let's go to game number 2. That'll be the Monday night game. And your guy, Jimmy Garoppolo, is is one of your points here. So tell me what the Niners and the Browns. The Niners are kind of a surprise 3-0. I don't know. I don't know how many people, if many people, were thinking that the Niners would be one of those teams to start that well this season, but they have. Their defense looks very good. The Browns are they're a first place team, but also kind of a disappointment, if that makes any sense at the same time, because a lot of people have expected them to look better, and really the only time that they looked any good was this past week against the Ravens, and we'll get to them here in a little bit as well. But the Browns, a lot of people thought the additions, Odell Beckham, pairing back with Jarvis Landry, a full season of Nick Chubb. Eventually they'll get Kareem Hunt in there. Their offensive line is absolutely terrible. Their defense is undisciplined. And I think there's a lot of things you can attribute to the fact that they hired a guy who had 8 successful games as a play caller and gave him a head coaching job. But I digress. Tell me why you like the Niners so much this week over the Browns.
Yeah, many reasons. First one that I don't think many people thinking about. People usually always talk about the West Coast teams traveling east for the 1 o'clock games and how big of a disadvantage that is, which is very true. But no one really thinks about an East Coast team traveling west for a night game. So when you think about when that game ends, probably close to midnight on the East Coast, which that's going to be could be a tiring effect on the East Coast team. The 49ers are coming off a bye, so they'll be very well rested. The Browns have played a Monday night football game, a Sunday night football game against the Rams at home, which was a huge game for them. Might have been the biggest game in that city in probably 20 years. And they traveled on the road to Baltimore for another game that they needed desperately to win. They put a lot of energy in a huge division game. So I don't know how much energy they'll have left for this game, traveling out west to play a San Francisco team. Is like Cleveland on that Rams game. This game in primetime for the 49ers fans and for their team is huge. It's a huge spotlight game and what they hope is a turnaround season. They've been better than I think people even realize. 49ers are second in Football Outsiders total DVOA this year. The Browns are only 14th. And the spread is saying that they're about even teams, which Football Outsiders is telling you there, which is not true. In their last game against Pittsburgh, the 49ers won despite having 5 turnovers, which is actually pretty impressive considering how much you have to dominate in the yardage to get those 5 turnovers. And I just think the Browns, the coaching edge also huge to the 49ers when you compare Kyle Shanahan with Freddie Kitchens. I know Shanahan hasn't accomplished a ton as a head coach, but I would put him among the 10 best coaches in the league right now easily. He's always gotten the most talent out of the 49ers, and I think they're a team on the rise. Also, the Browns are a public underdog, which will be a big theme for me. We like to fade the public when it makes sense and when we think it'll be profitable, because in the long run, Vegas is going to win more than the public, especially when there's an underdog. The public doesn't bet underdogs very often. Most of the time, it's 80, 90% of the time they're on the favorites. So when they're on the underdogs, it's a good spot to look at the favorite.
There you go. So we like the Niners here on Monday night against the Cleveland Browns. Last game we mentioned earlier, the Baltimore Ravens coming off of a blowout loss to the Cleveland Browns, and now they're facing a Pittsburgh Steelers team looking to gain a little bit of traction after winning on Monday Night Football against the Bengals, who may very well, I know a lot of people have talked about the Dolphins. The Bengals might be right there in terms of worst team in the league at this point. I still think I would say the Dolphins are worse, but the Bengals aren't too far behind. That being said, the Steelers are 3.5-point dogs. Why do you like the Steelers this week?
Well, this is interesting. Normally, I like to fade the 1 week overreactions. So the Ravens lost by 40, or they allowed 40 points to the Browns. They look terrible. Meanwhile, the Steelers, shine on national TV. So normally I would look to play the team that, got blown out the week before, or, maybe a little, undervalued because of the 1 week. But that's not the case here. I don't understand the spread. 3.5 points at home in this rivalry game for a home underdog is ridiculous in my mind. The spreads are normally, I normally don't have that big of a disagreement, but I could see a scenario where Pittsburgh, I think, should even be favored in the game. Baltimore's probably the most overrated team in the league right now. You mentioned how bad the Dolphins are. Well, when you know that the Ravens are allowing 7 yards per attempt, their one-story defensive line, 7 yards per play this year, which is the same as the Dolphins. So tied for last in the league, obviously, which is way ahead of the 30th team, which is the Bengals at 6.3 yards per play allowed. So their defense has been horrific, and they've lost, since last year, they've lost C.J. Mosley. Terrell Suggs. Jimmy Smith is hurt. So they've lost a ton of Darius Smith, obviously, on the Packers. So they've lost talent. Their defense is playing terrible. 13 of the 25 meetings between Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh in this series have been decided by 3 points or less. So that's a pretty telling number there and a pretty large sample. Also, the Steelers, I believe, their management sent a message that they believe in this quarterback and Mason Rudolph. They believe in this team. They don't think they're going to go 3-13. They think this is the guy. So that's got to send a lot of good vibes, a lot of good confidence with this team right now. Their defense is a lot better with Devin Bush and Fitzpatrick, a lot more talented. And in this spot as home underdogs, I think they'll come out with a straight-up win. And also, if you're looking long term, I don't think the Steelers are. You got pretty long odds on them right now, but they could win this division. I still believe that.
Yeah, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? After losing Ben Roethlisberger and playing somebody and giving up a first-round pick for Minkah Fitzpatrick, that's a big, bold move, and that's that message that you were talking about that they sent. Something else about Baltimore that I find interesting is I think a lot of people decided how good they were in Week 1. They always say you never get a second chance at a first impression. And I think the Ravens' first impression coming against Miami has been stuck in a lot of people's heads and making them think they're a lot better.
I didn't want to bring up that I didn't. And then they played Arizona, which they didn't even play that well against Arizona. But their strength of schedule, hasn't been great.
So they've played really well against two really bad teams. Very similar in that regard to the Minnesota Vikings. I think the Vikings are probably better than the Ravens are, but at that same token, we're talking about a blowout win against Miami, and I think a lot of people have that stuck in their head. And I also think that a lot of people make decisions in the first week of the season that they decide to carry over for the rest of the year. So we decided in Week 1, and by we I mean the public in general, has decided that Lamar Jackson has arrived and he's just going to hand the ball to Mark Ingram, throw it over the top to Hollywood Brown and all those other fast receivers a bunch. And since then, they got beat by Kansas City, and really, Kansas City played good offense against them, but their offense wasn't great, and they really shut down that offense. And Kansas City, nobody's going to confuse their defense.
In that game because Baltimore had a late flurry with a couple of lucky Lamar heaves on 4th down, where the game was really a blowout, and they kind of made the score look like it was. They got them covering the spread in that game.
Right. We got to love that We got to love that backdoor cover. I think that that's something. Like I was saying, the Chiefs. Nobody's going to confuse them with the 85 Bears, and the Chiefs basically beat them with their defense that day. And then you've got the Browns blowing them away. I mean, the Cleveland Browns, who the Browns hadn't blown anyone away. They hadn't done anything like that. So that was kind of their coming out party. I'm interested to see.
Yards. Just 7 yards per play allowed on defense. That is god awful.
Yeah, for those of you that are doing math.
I'm not talking about it, but it's been really bad.
Yeah, for those that can do math, 10 minus 7, that's 3. So, everybody, they only need to gain 3 more yards after that if that's the case. So, and that's an average play. So some plays are a lot better than that. Not as many are worse than that. So it's crazy to think, but for those of you then to recap, so we like this week the Dallas Cowboys. Unfortunately, that's how the first show is going to have to go, where we're betting against the Packers and on the Bears, because we got the Bears -5 in London against Oakland. We got the Steelers +3.5 against the Baltimore Ravens. We got the 49ers -3.5 against the Cleveland Browns on Monday night. So, Matt, real quick before we sign off here, tell us where we can find all your stuff. And ultimately, I think that your Twitter, since it's October, is going to be taken over by another sport.
Yes, the Savages will be rising in October, bringing home the 28th World Championship to the New York Yankees. But in between that, I always have lots of NFL-related thoughts at Matt Bove HS.
At Matt Bove HS. You can find me. I am at Jacob Westendorf. And you can find us all together at Packer Pulse to find our Twitter account. Thank you guys for listening. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will talk more next week about process, power rankings, all kinds of different stuff, and of course our picks of the week. So thank you guys for listening, and as always, we never hope that you guys lose money, but if you do happen to take Team Degenerate's advice and bet on the Cowboys, we're at least hoping that you lose a little bit on that one. So as always, go Pack Go.